California has a homeless problem, made worse by the pandemic. The governor wants to spend $12 billion to address it. But will that help the homeless or hurt them? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. California has a huge homeless problem. There are an estimated 161,000 homeless people in California, far more than any other state. This situation has made public places like the Venice Beach Boardwalk dangerous. Well, dangerous-er. The seagulls there will straight up cut you for your funnel cake. Minorities are also disproportionately affected by homelessness in California, which is why earlier this month, California Governor and bonitis sufferer Gavin Newsom proposed $12 billion to address California's homelessness crisis.
What we're proposing here today is a $12 billion two-year housing proposal, unprecedented, again, in American history, not just California history.
It's part of the $100 billion California Comeback Plan, the largest economic recovery package in state history. Upon seeing it, Joe Biden said, "That's not a recovery plan. That's a recovery plan." This infographic from Cal Matters shows that most of Newsom's $12 billion housing proposal would be spent on buying existing buildings and renovating them to become homes for the homeless. Those funds would essentially expand two projects Newsom launched last year, Project Room Key and Project Home Key. No word on if any of the funds will go towards the latest project Newsom launched this month, Project Please Don't Let Me Go Down in History as the Governor who was recalled and replaced by Caitlyn Jenner. It's a bit wordy as project titles go. Project Room Key was an emergency response primarily focused on preventing the spread of COVID among vulnerable homeless people who couldn't self-isolate or social distance. It addressed COVID by using funding from the Federal Emergency Management Agency to secure hotel and motel rooms for homeless individuals. I gotta say, given what usually goes on in hotel rooms, the sheets might actually be cleaner. Project Home Key is the next phase. It uses federal and state funding to purchase Project Room Key properties and turn them into permanent housing. In short, Governor Newsom is making a short-term federal pandemic relief into a long-term remedy for homelessness. Many applauded this as the beginning of a new industry and a new approach to fighting homelessness. It's a huge step up from California's old approach to fighting homelessness. And this is true. Literally giving homeless people cash. Yeah, in the 90s and early 2000s, San Francisco gave homeless people about $400 a month, which turned out to be a great incentive for people from across the country to come to San Francisco and be homeless. Now, proponents of Gavin Newsom's latest plan to convert old buildings and motels into housing for the homeless say this will actually save money because it's cheaper than building new housing units from the ground up. But many critics say that it's still too expensive and may not help the problem it's designed to solve. I'll explain more after the break. Welcome back. Newsom administration officials say the average cost to convert a unit into housing for people experiencing homelessness was nearly $150,000. While cheaper than building a unit from scratch, that's still a lot of money. It's almost enough money to pay for the dinner Gavin Newsom and his lobbyist friends had at the French Laundry restaurant. Some local government officials are already saying that Project Room Key's high cost makes it difficult to sustain motels sheltering the homeless long term. But that hasn't stopped officials from keeping them open. The high cost is part of why 13 Californian mayors say $12 billion isn't enough to stop homelessness. They're asking for $20 billion. It's kind of like that old story. If you give a politician $12 billion, they're going to ask for at least 2/3 more and still not fix the problem. My mother used to read that to me every night. That's why it turned out this way. Totally awesome. In February this year, California's state auditor, Elaine Howell, found that California's approach to solving homelessness is as ineffective as it is expensive. As ineffective as it is expensive? So, like breast implants for a Chihuahua. I paid a fortune for those 6 implants, and they didn't improve Lola's confidence at all. And Howell also describes California's approach to addressing homelessness as disjointed. That's because there are 41 different programs that provide funding to mitigate homelessness, yet there isn't any oversight or a statewide strategic plan. Elaine Howell also points out that government agencies and homeless service providers do not always comply with federal regulations or follow best practices. Although there's the Homeless Coordinating and Financing Council for coordinating and developing strategies to end homelessness, it hasn't done its job. So to recap, California financed an entirely new agency that's done nothing. If they're going to burn that much cash, they could at least do it outside where it could actually help the homeless by keeping them warm. To address this, Governor Newsom says that his proposal comes with greater accountability and transparency measures to make sure investments are put toward effective solutions to combat the homeless crisis. And if anyone knows anything about accountability and transparency, it's Gavin, we were outdoors and socially distanced, Newsom. Hopefully Newsom's new proposal works better than Proposition HHH, which California voters passed in 2016. It allocated $1.2 billion to build homes for the homeless in Los Angeles. The cost ended up being as much as $740,000 per unit, more than some luxury condos. Proposition Triple H was more jacked up and watered down than WWE's Triple H. And while Newsom says his new proposal would totally be accountable and transparent, he didn't specify exactly how, except that it will cost 10 times more. Why do I get the feeling this is going to be another breast implants for Chihuahua situation? And people have another concern, where the housing will be. See, under a state law Newsom signed in June 2020, pandemic housing projects for homeless people are permitted to jump over local planning processes. That means the project is exempt from local zoning and planning rules. Homeless buildings can go up in any neighborhood without consulting the community. I wish I could get a similar exemption, so I can finally put this statue up on my front lawn without zoning authorities getting all over my case. This exemption is why Project Homekey faced several lawsuits, though many were rejected. But there's one other issue that we need to consider. I'll get to that after the break. Welcome back. Proponents for Newsom's policy seem to be heavily focused on simply getting people indoors.
We're really trying to, look at this in a holistic manner. Motel conversions, apartment acquisitions, vacant lot, developments with modular or mobile homes. None of this was new, right? We've all been doing this around the state, but we've never done it with the size, scale, and urgency that we did it under Homekey.
So, doing something that wasn't that successful initially, only bigger, faster, and with more money behind it. Sure, why not? Worked for the Fast and Furious movies. Geoff Ross, who oversees Project Homekey, considered Homekey a success for providing 6,000 homes for 9,000 Californians within 90 days. And Newsom was proud to say that Project Roomkey provided temporary shelter to 36,000 people. Newsom says, as part of his $12 billion plan, $8.75 billion will unlock at least 46,000 new homeless housing units and affordable apartments. Wait, that's a success to him? That's $190,000 per unit. It's no surprise Newsom has no concept of what's affordable to the common citizen, considering his aunt looks like she thinks bananas cost $10. Even if Newsom's plan does build 46,000 housing units, it may not be a good indicator of success. Here's the problem. Broadly speaking, there are two types of homeless people: temporarily homeless people and chronically homeless people. A lot of people are temporarily homeless because they faced tough circumstances, like losing a job or fleeing an abusive spouse. There are programs designed to help these folks get back on their feet. Things like homeless shelters, battered women's shelters, and job placement programs. Others are chronically homeless. They're in a perpetual cycle of homelessness, often due to drug or alcohol addiction or mental health issues. They often get kicked out of homeless shelters or don't bother going because those places don't allow drugs or alcohol. These two groups often get conflated by politicians and the media. Kind of like how I conflate Limp Bizkit's music with the sound of a ferret having an asthma attack. I know they're technically not the same, but I just can't hear the difference. And the problem with conflating these two groups is that it leads to one-size-fits-all solutions which never seem to work. Take Project Homekey. It tries to address both groups at once. For example, employment and education services help temporarily homeless people, but do little for drug addicts. Mental health services are designed to help chronically homeless, but don't help someone who lost their job because of government lockdowns. But Newsom's policy and priority is not these services. His priority is housing.
We want to bring people into service, help get them housed as quickly as possible, and continue to support them however they need so that over time they become independent and they're back and pursuing whatever their abilities and capabilities will allow them to do.
This could work for people who are temporarily homeless, and if they're motivated to get back on their feet. But what about the kind of drug and alcohol rules that keep the chronically homeless out of shelters? No problem. Newsom's Housing First program doesn't have any rules about drugs and alcohol. People also don't have to enroll in mental health services even if they need it. I mean, you don't want to force rules on people that tell them what to do with their bodies, even if it's for their own health. Except mask mandates, of course. That's why critics argue these programs to provide housing unconditionally actually stimulate the behavior that causes chronic homelessness. It provides a stable residential environment for the homeless to live out their pathologies, administered by the social scientific sector and subsidized by the public. It seems authorities in San Francisco read this, but had the opposite takeaway. Last summer, they gave alcohol and marijuana, funded by taxpayers, to homeless people in hotels, also funded by taxpayers. But weirdly, it didn't reduce homelessness. Have they tried giving out cash? Anyway, a study of 3 of the best Housing First sites by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development found the Housing First approach for chronically homeless people doesn't resolve other issues that impede housing success. And the National Academies of Sciences found that there is no substantial published evidence to demonstrate that Housing First improves health outcomes or reduces healthcare costs. Even McDonald's soft-serve machines work more often than Housing First. In fact, a study in Birmingham, Alabama, found Housing First risks worsening substance abuse. That was actually why participants in that study, who were required to stay sober, began abandoning the provided housing. And this is why homeless housing programs are so controversial. There are lots of success stories of temporarily homeless people getting back on their feet. Proponents of these programs tend to imagine every homeless person like this. Meanwhile, in California alone, there are tens of thousands of chronically homeless people, often with drug addictions. People who are making neighborhoods more dangerous. People who government housing programs have never been successful in helping. Critics of the housing programs tend to imagine most homeless people are like this. The truth is a lot more complicated and requires nuance. Anyone that thinks this complex issue can be solved by throwing billions of dollars into an overly simplified one-size-fits-all solution, I tend to imagine like this. So what do you think? Leave your comments below. And please, consider supporting America Uncovered through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Go to patreon.com/AmericaUncovered to learn more. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. This is America Uncovered.